new market tax credits, and then we'll hear from our other experts. So I am joined by Tracy Hubbard, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Forward Community Investments. And Forward Community Investments is a statewide community development financing entity based in Madison, but also has offices in other parts of the state. And they are a 3-time winner of new market tax credits, totaling $75 million. And that has gone specifically to projects, and Tracy will tell us more about that, in Wisconsin, and specifically community facilities. So Forward Community Investments offers a bunch of financial products and advisory services, and their core mission is to use capital to reduce and eliminate racial and economic disparities in the state of Wisconsin. And they have done a phenomenal job. And I am biased because I used to work there. So Tracy leads the new market tax credit practice there, and she's joined by a great team that supports that work. So we'll hear from Tracy in a minute. Following Tracy, we're going to hear from Ivan Gamboa, who is a Senior VP Commercial Lending with TriCity National Bank. Ivan is also he leads the business development and closing of TriCity's portfolio of new market tax credit investments. And he has a great team behind him. I invited Ivan to be a part of this because TriCity National Bank and the influence of Ivan was the investor in Notre School of Milwaukee. So we're going to be unfolding some details about that deal as we go on, but Ivan was there. And I should also mention that Ivan was reappointed in April of 2019 as the chairman of the board for the Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Authority. So Ivan brings great skill, experience, and enthusiasm for this work. So we look forward to hearing from him from the investor perspective on the new market tax credits. And our last presenter is Patrick Landry. Patrick Landry is the president of Notre School of Milwaukee. In 2019, late 2019, Notre School of Milwaukee closed a $7 million new market tax credit transaction for the expansion of their 1905 school. And they are adding students, services, and increasing their middle school to include boys. Patrick is a Milwaukee native. He graduated from Marquette, has a master's in elementary education from Northwestern, and has a Master of Arts in Educational Administration from Notre Dame. And so Patrick is just going to share what it's like as a community facility to engage in a $7 million new market tax credit project, some tips and tricks from the perspective of the project owner. So we'll get started with that, and I will start by sharing my screen. Okay. Okay, and here is just a webinar roadmap for us. I kind of just shared that with you, the rundown of each of our panelists. We do hope to have about 10 or 15 minutes at the end from any questions that you might have as participants, and you'll need to use the Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom screen in order to do that. And then we'll hopefully be able to end with some concluding remarks. Here we are. Okay, so I wanted to start the presentation today by just grounding the participants in this webinar in what is the formation and the founding of the New Market Tax Credit Program. The New Market Tax Credit Program is administered through the Community Development Financial Institutions Fund of the U.S. Department of Treasury, and it was created in 1994. And the mission of this office of the U.S. Department of Treasury is this. It's to increase the economic opportunity, promote community development investments for underserved populations in distressed communities throughout the United States. And it's a powerful vision to economically empower America's underserved and distressed communities. So out of this fund comes the program, New Markets Tax Credits, and we just say NMTC for short. So I'm going to give just a brief overview of what that is. So the New Market Tax Credits is an opportunity, it's an important source of financing for businesses and community facilities, which I I just want to point out that this webinar is focused on community facilities. So it's a source of financing for community facilities located in America's most distressed rural and urban communities. Congress authorized this in 2000, and the idea was to use a tax credit to bring down the cost of capital for projects located in distressed communities. In essence, to provide an incentive for private investment into underinvested areas that have many assets and many opportunities to grow and expand, particularly community facilities. So community development entities like Forward Community Investments that we have joining us apply for the allocation authority from that fund that I just mentioned, the CDFI fund. They apply to get some authority to use the proceeds of investments that they receive from private investments and invest those proceeds of investments into qualified projects in specific geographies. So, and that is exactly what the slide says here. We're going to dig into a little bit more of that, but just a key distinction, which is why it's bolded on your screen. NMTCs are awarded to community development entities like Forward Community Investments, like WIDA. They have a community development entity also. There are many others in Wisconsin. They are not awarded to individuals or businesses. They must go through this specific entity, and Tracy's going to share about that in a bit. As I mentioned, it was started in 2000 under the Community Renewal and Tax Relief Act. It has been subject to annual reauthorizations since 2006. So it's true that every year we're not completely sure whether or not the program will continue. We, of course, are working, we being the industry, are working to try and get this program to be more of a permanent program, but still we're under the annual reauthorizations. We have had 15 application rounds to date, and that CDFI fund has allocation awards across the nation of $57 billion. And if we think about what that means, that is $57 billion of new market tax credit financed, right? Facilitated projects in specific communities, creating specific community impact. It's just an incredible, incredible program. Okay, let's see. So today we want to talk specifically about why would a community facility go for new market tax credits? And there's several reasons. One, you have a project and you want to more rapidly finalize compiling the sources for the project. You can't wait as long as it's going to take to finish the capital campaign, for example. So you're looking for that last piece of capital and get started and finish that project so that you can start making the impact and meeting the needs in the community that you set out to do. New market tax credits is an opportunity for you as a community facility executive director or whatnot, stakeholder, to make more impact. So maybe we had scheduled a $10 million originally, but we realized that, you know, the community needs a $12 million building. And where are we going to find that capital? We need the $12 million building because the kind of impact, the kind of programming, the number of students that we want in our classrooms needs a bigger building, but we are tapped out with other sources. We can make more impact and serve more people by getting this special source of capital. It's financial capital, okay, to fund the project. And what I have found is with community facilities that are often rooted in a capital campaign for the majority of their sources, I find that donors to capital campaigns are very excited about the fact that their dollars are going to be leveraged and amplified because of this new market tax credit capital piece. And I'll explain more about that later. The new market tax credit capital is low cost capital. When CDEs like Tracy's at Forward Community Investment apply for allocation authority, they are committing to the U.S. Department of Treasury that their cost of capital with the new market program is going to be below market, and it's going to be more flexible. Maybe there's differences in collateral requirements. Maybe there's longer amortization periods. Myriad things happen, but CDEs like Tracy's at FCI have to commit to this. And that means that our cost of capital as community facilities is much lower. And then the big reason why people go through the complexity and the nuance of engaging in a community facility financed by new market tax credits is the debt conversion. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But at the end of the 7-year compliance period, a significant portion of the new market's benefit may be converted to equity. And that is why we go for it. So I will continue on. So when we're thinking about, okay, where do we start with new market tax credits? It starts with geography. I mentioned earlier that the program was set up to bring private investment into underserved and, as the CDFI fund calls it, distressed communities. So we first start with mapping the address, and we find whether the geography of the project is located in a severely distressed qualified census tract. And as you can see, I've pulled up a map, and this is part of Milwaukee, and I pulled up the map using the CDFI fund mapping software, and this is what we're finding is that for that particular project, it is located in what we would call a severely distressed census tract based on the poverty level, tract income, and area median income. As well, we can be looking at whether it's rural or urban, and that's another idea, but this is obviously an urban project. So what exactly is a low-income community? This is a phrase that's important, and why I say low-income community, I am framing that in the new market tax credit sort of code, okay? So specifically the IRS code. So what is a low-income community? This is based on census tract data, and we're looking at median income and poverty rate in that census tract and unemployment, okay? So those three things. And there's a distinction between, is it qualified as a new market tax credit eligible geography, and is it even higher distress? So is it qualified and higher distress? So if it's higher distress, we're really looking at, okay, what is the unemployment in addition to the median income and poverty? What about, is it rural? Is there a brownfield there? Is it a food desert? Is it a state, local economic development zone? And many other ways that it can qualify as higher distress. So why we spend time on this is because the idea, again, of the program is to bring private investment into a qualified low-income community that has been underserved from mainstream capital. So that's why it matters. So why do it? So I want to just kind of quickly go through what I call the benefit of doing this. So let's say we have a $10 million community facility that we are looking, we know that it's located in a severely distressed census tract. We know that it qualifies on the basis of geography. So what I want to do is kind of take you through how we would look at what benefit would new markets create from a financial perspective. So $10 million project, the statutory rate for new markets tax credits is 39%. So we would take 10 million times 39%, and then we have tax credits generated from that of 3.9 million. This is the credit that the investor, which I'll get into in just a minute, the investor like Ivan would receive over 7 years for investing in a CDE, who also invests then into the project in the qualified geography. So that's the benefit to the investor, $3.9 million. Investors do not pay dollar for dollar for the tax credit because the tax credit comes in over time, over 7 years. There's a time value of money, and there's many other things going on in the market right now, as you might imagine. So I think 75 cents is roughly, maybe even on the high side of what we're seeing right now around investments. So what would an investor pay for $3.9 million in tax credits over 7 years? At 75 cents, that's about $2.925 million. There are some closing fees, there are some closing costs, and that takes some cash. And so that looks about like $925 in my model here. And that brings the net NMTC cash to the project, I'm calling it, the $2 million of the debt conversion that converts to equity at the end of 7 years, $2 million. So we have a $10 million project. And what I'm saying with this chart is that after fees, after the pricing from the investor, we're looking at about a 20% benefit to the project, meaning there is $2 million for your $10 million project. Okay. So I want to take us through the leverage structure. I spoke with my team, the dream team here for Notre Dame School of Milwaukee, about how to approach the leverage structure with the attendees today. And we decided that this is a very smart group of people that showed up for this today. So I'm going to take you through the real deal here on the leverage structure. I am going to do it at a summary level, but I do want to point out that any one of us is available to really talk you through the nuances of this. And so this is kind of a summary structure of what actually Notre Dame School of Milwaukee looked at when they renovated and expanded their school. So what we have is a $7 million project at the top. And you will notice here again that because it's a $7 million project, we take it times the statutory percentage, which is 39%. And we take that 7 million times the 39%. And what you'll see on the left side of your screen there is $2.73 million. And that's that 39% that the investor is going to be able to take as a tax credit over 7 years. That investor is not going to pay $2.73 million to get $2.73 million over 7 years. The investor will pay, and this was a while back, so we were in the mid 80s, and I have changed numbers a little bit here, so I'm not exposing anything, but that was a while back where the market was in the mid 80s. And so when you pay 83 cents, you're basically just taking 2.7 times 83 cents, and that is going to be an investor contribution to this middle box, the investment fund, of 2.2659. Okay, so we have $7 million project, and we know that the investor is paying 2.265 for its tax credits, and we still have a $7 million project though. So there's a remainder amount of sources that it has to get us to that $7 million, and that is on the right side of your screen. That is your leverage loan. And so the leverage loan is the rest of the capital. Okay, we've got our new markets on the left, and we've got our leverage loan on the right. And if you add those together, you're going to get $7 million, which is our project cost. What is this leverage loan? What is it? For many community facility projects, it is capital campaign proceeds, cash in hand. It is bridge debt that will bridge the receipt of capital campaign over time. It is perhaps a city grant. It could be other philanthropic dollars that are aggregated in this entity called the leverage lender. And with Notre Dame School of Milwaukee, our leverage lender is what we call an affiliate of the borrower, right? We created a specific entity to aggregate these dollars of 4.734, which included capital campaign, a very short, small bridge loan, and some other things, bringing those together in the investment fund. And that's going to equal $7 million. Okay, so we invest that $7 million into, this is the sub-CDE, this is Tracy, this is Forward Community Investments. And that investment has to go through the community development entity because the community development entity has the tax credits, right? They've applied to the Community Development Financial Institutions Fund, and they've been awarded it. And hopefully any day we will hear another great piece of news, hopefully that FCI has won yet another award. And so FCI takes this qualified equity investment of $7 million, and they're going to charge some fees because they've spent a lot of time and they have a lot of staff and infrastructure to support this program. So they're going to charge some fees for you to use their tax credits. And then at the bottom, there are two loans, and I'm very specifically using the language of loans because that's what they are. The A note, 4.734. It's the same number as the leverage loan up top. It represents the capital that is brought to the investment fund by the leverage lender. And we talked a little bit about that already. The B note, what could that be? The B note is why we are doing this project, okay? So the B note, if we trace from the top left, is that 2.265 that the investor paid for the 7 years of tax credits over 7 years, the 2.7 over 7 years. And FCI or the CDE has taken out their fees, and now we have the B note. From the B note, we take out some professional fees, we take out accounting fees, we take asset management fees that would go to the community development entity as they manage this for the 7 years. And what we end up with is the 4.734 plus the B note for a project like Notre Dame to use to literally fund draws, right? You are funding draws for your project. And you are building a project that is meeting the needs and creating a bunch of community impact. And what it ends up being, typically, this B note, typically is about 20% of the total structure, the total project cost. So about 20% of 7 million is what, after fees and everything else, the project will end up with. So after 7 years, what happens? I mentioned this earlier. After 7 years, hopefully all your capital campaign contributions have come in, you've paid off any bridge debt, you have a beautiful project, it's operating wonderfully at stabilization. And at the end of 7 years, the new market tax credit investor up here on the left, who has owned the investment fund, 100% has owned that investment fund, puts its interest in that fund. It puts its interest in that fund to the community facility. In our example, Notre Dame School of Milwaukee. It puts its interest to Notre Dame School of Milwaukee for about $1,000. It says you can step in and own this investment fund for $1,000. And so it collapses the structure. All the boxes and lines come down. And, well, there's no one to pay back, right? This $2 million B note, the investor's out. They've received their tax credits. They're happy. They have now sold their interest in the investment fund to our example here, Notre Dame. And there's no one to pay back that B note. So it converts to equity, right? And so essentially what we had was 4.7 plus 2 million minus some fees to build a project, but we are only paying back the 4.734. The 2 million has collapsed. Okay. There's that. I've spent 15 years learning that structure. So you all just learned it in about 8 minutes. So congratulations. And by the way, please reach out if you have questions about any of that. So then now the question is like, okay, I got this leverage structure. I understand that I have to be in a distressed census tract. Do I have a project as a community facility? Do I have a project? Here's how you know. Are you located in a highly distressed census tract? Let's map it. Let's start right there. Are you creating significant community impact? For Patrick, he's going to talk about this. It's about serving the students. It's about serving the community. It's about having more teachers, having more resources, serving the families, transforming the neighborhood, or amplifying what's already great in that neighborhood. Tons of community impact. But for the new market tax credits, would this project happen? Because if it would, then we don't need the tax credits. Do you have a good size for the deal? Is it 5 million or more? Is it 5 million or more? That's the ideal. Is going for this a good fit for the organization strategically? Because it's a lot of work, as Patrick will go into. Does this fit your goals to spend the time, the resources to go through this type of financing? Does your project fit with the timing of the announcements around awards and CDEs having this kind of allocation authority? Does it fit well? And are you ready to go? So I had mentioned the 4.5 million in leverage debt in my previous example. That has to be there on closing day. It all has to be there on closing day. And so you've got to make sure that those sources are committed. And then finally, and really importantly, Patrick and I could tell many stories about this, is making sure that approvals are in place. And I'm talking about permitting, I'm talking about zoning, all of those things. So where can you find allocation? Well, Forward Community Investments or any other kind of community development entity. So I just want to point out that there is a list on the CDFI Fund website, but also, and you can search by geography and type of project. So I finally just want to conclude my thoughts with this. what does a successful project look like? I've been working on a variety of projects, but primarily community facilities that are owned by nonprofit organizations. I've been working on them for about 15 years. And what we find is that, or what I found, and my team has found, is that a successful project has the following. Number one, community support. I'm talking about elected official support, and I'm talking about neighbors supporting it. I'm talking about businesses supporting it. I'm talking about all of that, that the community that is most impacted by this project is vocally supporting this project and even financially supporting this project. Absolutely. That you have strong financial sources in the budget other than new markets. We don't start with new markets. New markets complements and amplifies strong sources that are already there. A successful project identifies a very clear need for new markets. If the need for new markets isn't clear, we have problems. It's really hard to get a deal closed. You properly have sized the amount of new market tax credit allocation, meaning, do you need $7 million? Do you need $10 million? Or do you really need 5? We have to make sure that the project owner is solid. And by that, I mean you have people on your staff, your board, that are willing to dig in. They don't have to be new market tax credit experts, but they're willing to dig in, and they have faith that this type of structure is worth the pain and the complexity. And they're willing to learn, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to represent that they can be compliant with this kind of structure for the 7 years. And then finally, a great deal team. And by deal team, I mean, we start, of course, with the project owner, the actual organization, but we're also talking about who is our CDE, who is our investor, who are the consultants on the team, who's the architect, who's the GC. All of these players work together, and development director at the organization. They all work together for a successful project. And the most successful projects have a solid deal team, including the third-party consultants and the investors in that. They're all working together. And that is why I really chose to highlight Notre Dame School of Milwaukee today, and Forward Community Investments and TriCity, because this is a great deal team, and that is why we were able to get the complexity done. So with that, I want to go ahead and hand it over to my colleague, Tracy, and we'll get it started. There you go, Tracy. Okay, you'll need to unmute, Tracy.
Thanks for the reminder.
Yeah.
So we have a few extra boxes. So today I just want to talk to you about FCI, how we operate as a CDFI, what we're looking for in a potential borrower, what our process looks like, and then, you know, what deals we've already done and what they look like. So I'll start with the obvious. We're for community investments. We do have a mission. It's the investor, connector, and advisor for organizations and initiatives that reduce racial, economic, and social disparities in Wisconsin communities. We are exclusive to Wisconsin. We only operate in the state of Wisconsin. We are a nonprofit first and a community development financial institution second, and we operate as a statewide revolving loan fund. We have an additional class, as Carrie used, because we're using a lot of acronyms. We are also considered a CDE with our CDFI designation. We've operated since 1994, and we provide lending and advisory services to nonprofit mission-driven organizations in underinvested communities. Our new market tax credit program, we're a new entrant. We're a particularly small CDFI, and so we are a successful 4-time new market tax credit allocatee, totaling 120 million. That's phenomenal news for us. We are very, very small, and our most recent award was 45 million in this past year. We focus on financing community facility building projects that expand the provision of community goods and services in highly distressed census tracts throughout Wisconsin. My apologies, we're using very specific programmatic language. And I'll explain, what we consider community goods and services. And we consider our relationships with borrowers to be long-term partnerships. We are invested in their success. This is a 7-year relationship. We see our role as the CDE to make it it's going to be painful, but to make it as painless as possible and to be, to make it workable. This is complicated. There's no way around that. FCI's new market tax credit projects and borrowers, this is what we're looking for. This is actually directly from our new market tax credit application. Please don't steal it, anyone. But this is what we focus on. This is what we said we're going to use it for. We generally do what we say in the application. So FCI invests across all community development sectors. We target our new market tax credits to the most capital-starved census tracts, as Carrie was saying. We focus on owned and operated real estate projects that are owned and operated by nonprofit organizations or are anchored by mission-focused tenants. So we talked about the community goods and services. These often look like healthy foods, education, healthcare, and they are, always located in the highly distressed census tracts. We also additionally look for high quality and accessible jobs. We look for local employment opportunities. We look for how the construction, your construction firm is sourcing and subcontracting to minority and women-owned businesses. We look for strong entrepreneurship programs within there, serving people who normally don't have access to those industries. And then, of course, and Carrie said it's the catalytic development aligned with state, county, and local economic development priorities. I can't strongly encourage you enough. For us, we want to see community input. We want to see community input either in the design or support. We want to know that the community wants this there, not that it is someone just placing a wonderful idea within community. And so that for us is really important. We do evaluate investments to ensure racial equity is addressed in a form consistent with the project's outcomes. So I mentioned apprenticeship opportunities in the construction level, local employment opportunities, those are. And then the most important one, which I did put as the last bullet point, it is without new market tax credits, these projects wouldn't happen. We are very small, and as much as $45 million sounds like a large allocation. It goes very fast. There are many, many wonderful projects out there. And for us, our determinant is solely that the projects wouldn't happen without new market tax credits. Our process, so we generally have like a meet and greet with the potential borrower. We're introduced, they get to know us, we get to know them. If there seems to be a mission alignment with all of those social impacts I was talking about, we invite them to complete our intake form for focus solely on mission alignment and community impacts. We have a advisory board with community representation that reviews and approves our potential projects for inclusion in our pipeline. For our new market tax credit allocation. So we've already applied in 2019 in the summer to hear about an award this summer. Those pipelines were already sourced last year. And so I strongly encourage you, if you have interest, but this isn't a wait till you're ready. It is something you should be thinking about now, because a lot of us as CDEs, as part of our application, we have to have a very specific pipeline up to the amount of our request. Our request when we won 45 million was 46 million. Our last application, we actually requested 60 million. That means I have a tentative pipeline of $60 million in deals that I could speak to their community impacts, where they're located, their addresses, entities, everything. That's how specific in the application it is. But I'll get to the part if you are need a little bit more. And then we wait patiently for the allocation awards to be announced, which we are currently waiting very, very patiently to hear. And once that happens, so FCI's process is to genuinely, we've already worked with these potential borrowers. We go back to our pipeline that was included in the application. We check in with them. We see where the deal is. Is the project ready? Sometimes it's not. Like it just happens. Life happens. COVID happens. A lot of things happen. And things don't happen the way they think, or maybe they got off the ground with another CDE and are already closed and in process. And those are wonderful opportunities too. So there's always the opportunity that while there's this pipeline within the application, there are opportunities at this point when we've gone through and initially checked our original pipeline, and if they're not ready or they've already closed with someone else, which happens, a lot of people are in a lot of different applications, that we do then start to look at the one we've been building in the meantime, right? So we currently are sourcing deals for a pipeline for this year's application. So this is a process, but there's always opportunities that you can enter. You know, if we had a deal that fell out right now, we would be looking at what we're sourcing right now to see if we could fill that. Once we verify project readiness, or we find other deals, if we have to do some substitutions, we do take that back to our advisory board, who formally approves the use of allocation for projects that are ready. This is the part, these next two bullet points are almost in tandem at the same time, but FCI does begin the due diligence for the project with a focus on deal structure at this point. We also issue a term sheet that includes our community benefits agreement. So these are all those community impacts that we talked about, representation in the constructions, commitments to local hiring, that maybe, or childcare slots, or, you know, services that you may already do as your natural course of business, but expect to expand with this building. After that, after closing, FCI is your partner in, you know, servicing these loans and collecting the compliance items. There are a few compliance items, I think, semi-annually that you must submit, along with financials, just like if you had a regular loan. And so we work with you during the duration of the compliance period of 7 years. Our current New Market tax credit portfolio, we have deployed 90 of the 120. So we're currently in deployment mode for the remaining portion of our last award. We have closed 14 leveraged deals totaling 81 million and 2 small Quilicky loan pools. We're not talking about loan pools today, so all the statistics on the rest of this slide are only related to leveraged deals, which is the structure you're discussing today. Our structure and size, we've done 10 multi-CDE deals. So while Carrie presented you the one from Notre Dame that had only 1 CDE, there are much bigger projects that might have multiple CDEs. FCI might come in with 8 million or 3 million in these arrangements, and there might be other CDE partners and more added complexity. And we have done 4 single CDE deals. That's where we're just the only CDE in the deal. Notre Dame is an example of that one. As for our borrower profiles, if you're wondering, we have done leverage deals with 10 nonprofits. They include intergenerational care center, child care center, charter schools, community centers, community collaborative partnerships. And we've also done 4 for-profit developers that had nonprofit tenants. So that's the very important part of that. We would not do a for-profit developer as a matter of course. And those were including behavioral health clinics, free health clinic, and an innovation campus. So far, our deployment has a majority in the Milwaukee area, but it really can be any highly distressed census tract or rural or non-metropolitan area in Wisconsin. We currently have deployed 53.7 million in Milwaukee, and we do, as a matter of our allocation agreement, have rural requirements for FCI, and so we've deployed 21.8 million rurally or non-metro, and that does include an $8 million deal with a tribal entity. And then the most important thing is why our New Market tax credits, the 81 million that we've closed, has resulted in 24.3 million in net benefit to the project. So that B note that Carrie was talking about, it becomes a large amount, and that's money that doesn't have to be fundraised. It does have a 7-year wait, but it exists there. And so we saw New Market Tax Credit Program as an opportunity to help nonprofits access capital and benefit from this B note, the net benefit to the project, and it expanded our ability to serve larger projects. And I included a slide of our current borrowers. And I think that's it for me. So.
Okay.
And I will provide my slides to Carrie, and she can share it with.
All right. Thanks, Tracy. If you can just stop sharing, and then I'll hand it over to Ivan. Thanks so much, Tracy. And as I am handing over, I just want to say, yes, it's 120 million. Is that right, Tracy, that you've won? Okay, so, okay, wonderful, awesome. And let us get going here with, let me, okay, all right, and then, okay, well, Ivan's not having a slide, so go ahead, Ivan.
All right, can everyone hear me? I see my screen is frozen right now, but anyway, my name is Ivan Gamboa. I'm with TriCity National Bank. We are a community bank on steroids, I describe ourselves. We're headquartered in Oak Creek. We are about $1.5 billion in assets, and we have a legal lending limit around $25 million. We focus our portfolio in Southeast Wisconsin, although we will go to other parts of Wisconsin if there's a reason for us to take us there, whether it's an existing borrower or it's an area that we're pretty familiar with. Thank you for having us today. You know, new market tax credits is something that we are proud of as a community bank, to be able to offer new market tax credit products, whether it's the tax credit investment, whether it's the leverage loan. You know, we've been doing new market tax credits for roughly since 2004. We've been involved in transactions. And then we've been involved in tax credit investments since about 2016. And we would do tax credits investments on an annual basis. We are a smaller bank, so that means that we are not a large national player. We don't buy large chunks of investments. All of the investments that we do are on a deal-by-deal basis. We really look for the right deals to have the investment in, and we'll go over what that means down the road. But we don't buy large. Sometimes there'll be banks or other institutions that buy large chunks of investments from a CDE, and then the CDE really just kind of pools those all together and divides those investments between multiple projects. We are not, so although it's me today in this presentation, we have a small dedicated team that always works on these together. And so one of those key people is Brian Johnson. He's a VP in our finance department, and he's was actually a lender prior to being in the finance department, and that's really key in this. He's a CPA, and he is key, instrumental in us starting to be able to do the tax credit investments, and to have a strategy internally on how much of an investment we buy and how we do it over the longer period of time. And what that has done is we've been able to communicate clearly with all our partners, our CDE partners, the attorney community that's involved in these, on how much investments TriCity is going to buy on an annual basis. And so that lets everyone know how we can partner. The other person on the new market tax credit team is Jessica Klabrich, and she helps us maintain compliance and make sure that payments are going as planned, and we're just meeting all those requirements that you need to do throughout those 7 years. It's important to us that this portfolio remain clean and remain compliant so that we can keep making investments. I think for a community bank like ourselves, we just want to make sure that that this is a marathon, that we can keep doing this over an extended period of time. As far as new market tax credit deals, we've been involved in many, but for today, for just investment purposes, we've been involved with over $30 million of allocation. A third of those are roughly healthcare related projects, clinics. 40% of those are involved in small business loan pools. And we'll get into that a little bit more. And then the remaining 22% have been in education. That's important because those are the things that we see as important in the community, the way we see impact happening, especially with the loan pools as well. It's a way, we consider ourselves a small business bank, and we feel like those loan pools are a way that we can offer new market tax credit benefits to our small business customers. Those are a little different than the leverage model that we talked about earlier, but I'm very glad that that leverage model we went over it, because if you're listening to this, your situation is always very unique, and every deal is unique. And I think it's important for you to understand that basic leverage model, but then you need a good team to help apply what that leverage model looks like to your actual deal for yourself. TriCity will continue to buy investments. We were actually talking with our finance team, and we will roughly keep the same pace that we have been going. The key part for a financial institution is being profitable. We have to be a bank that makes money. We pride ourselves on being a hometown bank and a solid bank. We've gone through this pandemic process fairly well, and we continue to be open for business and continue looking for new clients. We'd never stop lending through any of these months, and I think that is key. If we have no net profit, we have no reason to buy tax credits. And TriCity, we will continue to be a profitable bank because we are well run. But I think as investors, that's the main difference between being a large bank and a small bank, again, which we're a small bank in comparative in the new market world, is that we're really looking hard at the type of deal that we're investing in, and we're looking at it from a relationship side. We're looking at buying the tax credit, doing the leverage loan, and being the bank for that borrower. We'll continue to look at all different. You don't have to be in healthcare or small business loan pool or education. We can look at other areas, but the key part of it is we want to be that bank for that borrower. So with that, I want to turn it back over to Carrie so we can hear from Patrick in Notre Dame.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ivan. Really, really appreciate it. So now we're going to head over to Patrick. And Patrick, I am going to make sure that you are the host and that you therefore can share your screen. And as you are sharing that screen, I'll just say Notre Dame School of Milwaukee and what they do, their mission, their vision, and their need for new market tax credits to make the level of impact that they are making is the reason why I think I would say everyone else on this call, why we care about this project. Why we care about this program. They really exemplify the purpose and the possibility that can come from harnessing the new market tax credits and all of the capital that it marshals along with it to make significant impact and build on the assets that are already present in that neighborhood. So with that, I am going to hand it over to Patrick.
Great. Hello, everybody. Good to be with you. A little bit of background on Notre Dame. Notre Dame School of Milwaukee is a Catholic school primarily funded by the Choice Program in the state of Wisconsin, both the Milwaukee and the Wisconsin Choice Program. And we serve currently 539 students, and next year we'll be at 564 students. We are in the 53215 zip code, which has the most children under the age of 10 in the state. And so there's very much a need for high quality schools everywhere, but particularly in the neighborhood that we're located in. I learned about New Markets tax credits kind of casually when somebody mentioned, when we were talking about a building project, if I was familiar with the program. I had no idea. That was in the summer of 2018. And I am by no means an expert, but available as kind of from a CEO perspective to be as helpful as I can to any of you out there. For us, the real reason why we needed this was we have been a rapidly growing school. And we're also very much a school of quality. For the last 3 years, we've received a 5-star designation from this Department of Public Instruction. And I don't need to read the slide, but you can see we've very strategically have grown from an all-girls middle school with 26 girls into a one school, but 3 programs, a co-ed elementary, an all-girls program, and the most recent is an all-boys middle school in 2018. And so not only did we need additional space because we were really bursting at the seams, but we also were in a building that was built in 1905, a classic old Catholic school building with the coat closets and no gymnasium, no elevator, no science room, no places for small group or specialized instruction. And so for us, we needed not only new space in terms of all of those things I just mentioned, but additional space because we were growing so quickly. For us, we very thoughtfully thought about what were all the wants and the needs that we had, not only for classroom space, of which we absolutely needed this for this upcoming fall, but what are the things that all kids really deserve in a school? We want to be a school where kids have a gymnasium and can participate in after-school sports and gym class. We want a safe space where right now you could enter the school and go into any classroom because there was no locked door and kind of secure entry point. We wanted an accessible space where kids that had special needs physically, but also socio-emotional and cognitively, that we had spaces for them and could serve them properly. We wanted a school that had a library for a growing school, particularly adding middle school boys. We wanted a space where our teachers could come together comfortably and plan and collaborate. And so all of these things went into the $7 million project that we put together using the New Market tax credit model. Just a little background on timing, because for us, we really hit the ground running when it came to soliciting and engaging our longtime supporters and our board in December of 2017. And that was important for us because, we had to have a strong base of support to show that this project, one, was happening, but also you saw that, New Market tax credit can be that additional 20%. If you don't have the 80 secure with pledges and very a strong pipeline, you're not going to be looked at as favorably, and you're going to have a hard time accessing New Market tax credits as a capital opportunity. So this was our timeline. We're currently working on the construction's ongoing and will be done at the end of July. This is a little bit of a simple example of those boxes and those lines. For us, the sources, you can see where our pledges lined up, how much cash we brought, the bridge loan that really were for those pledges that were going to be paid out over 3, 5, 7 years that we packaged with TriCity National Bank, the New Market tax credit portion from community investments, and our net benefit then was $1.4 million. And for me, if I thought about having to raise an additional 1.4 million, $1,400,000 givers, and stewarding those relationships and the time that would have taken, and quite frankly, for a school of our size, we would not have been able to. And so for us to be able to have that 1.4 million, that enhanced this project for all of those things that we wanted our children to have. You can see then on the uses side, the construction costs, our design and development, the financing, a portion of that is the new market financing and the fees associated, legal, accounting, et cetera, and then a contingency fund. And so you can see where the two numbers line up really nicely. A little bit of background on the actual project and what it looks like. This is our campus. We had a former convent that we demolished, and this will be the building that's constructed now. A lot of natural light, new gym, beautiful windows and library space and art space and science lab. And we would not have been able to do this without that additional, $1.4 million. And so I think there were a few, and I'm just going to scroll through so you can get more of a sense of what we were doing here. There were no doubt some challenges. The process is complex. The process is time intensive. We had weekly calls with representatives from all of the folks on the phone right now, but it was so worth it. And I can't emphasize that enough. We also, I think the challenge was to make sure that you're in a good place when it comes to that pipeline. A lot of the work is engaging your board and engaging your donors with a very clear vision, so that when it's time to apply and it's a time to find the CDE and an investor, you have a very clear-cut case that this project's happening. And so I think really putting the due diligence in to get that pipeline filled and to make sure that that 20% is possible for you to tap into. A few of my recommendations, one is to engage with a professional. Carrie was our consultant on this, and we very much needed that expertise. We're a school that's always trying to save money, and I think for a while we thought maybe we can just figure this out on our own, and we couldn't. That expertise from a consultant combined with, we had a working group made up of board members, our finance team, board members particularly with a finance, real estate, and legal background. And this small working group helped us work through a lot of the questions that came up and also participated on those weekly calls. A few other pieces of advice that I would just share is have a very clear vision. For us, when you saw that we were having gym in a classroom, when you saw the shape that the facility was in and the need that we had in the not only the need we had as a growing school, but of a high quality school, we were able to really get that vision, I think, very clear and help train our board and our supporters to help us get the initial funds needed to tap into this. So have a clear vision, believe in that vision, have a project that somebody could say, how the heck could I not want to support this? Engage with a professional to help you guide you through that process, because it's really important. It is complex, but it's worth it. And the second and the third is, think about that small steering group. How do you engage your development person, your finance person, and then a few strategic board members that really can kind of be your critical friends and help you think about things ahead of time, anticipate questions, and really work through the details. I think I had a question pop up. I'm not sure.
You did. So if you just want to stop sharing your screen.
Yeah.
Okay. 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 So we'll get to questions here, and I do want to just encourage, if anyone is, having a question, go ahead and press that Q&A box, and we do have a question. But I guess I would, before we jump into questions, we're doing good on time here, is to just say that with the Notre Dame School of Milwaukee, Patrick is right. This team that they assembled, I think you called it the small working group, just outstanding in terms of just a desire to to get this project done and to see it through. Great technical expertise on the financial side, as well as just great leadership of the stakeholders. And I'm not going to embarrass Patrick too much here, but we just had in this project outstanding leadership, both on the financial side, but also just engaging of the community. And you had a very, and from my perspective, like a very swift and very focused capital campaign. But that's because you worked on it as a group, like every day, right? Every day. And so it was great. And I really enjoyed putting together kind of, like I said, the deal team. And that's when we saw like all those lines and boxes on that leverage deal. Each and every one of those lines and boxes represents a set of documents, some cost, but also like a plan, a structure for how we're going to accomplish this building project and the impact. And already, I mean, the impact from Notre Dame already, even the building has not opened yet, but we've experienced this pandemic now, and they've stepped up in so many ways, and it's just amazing. And it makes my job and my career just a pleasure. So just a pleasure to do that. So I see we have a couple questions, and one of them goes to Tracy specifically, and this is, Tracy, could you clarify the timing of applications for the current funding cycle? And I believe that would be the allocation announcement. And then also your timing cycle at FCI. Does FCI have some allocation available now for nonprofits to request, even if they're not in the original pipeline, or do we need to go ahead and wait till the next cycle? So that one is specific to Tracy.
Yeah, those are great questions, and they're a little bit complicated. So we do have 30 million left, and as part of our allocation agreement, we have a restriction to small COLICI loans. So those are the small COLICI loan pools that you heard about. Those are generally a completely different structure. There's no B note. It's just a different vehicle for new market tax credits. And so that requirement is 8 million. And then we have a rural requirement, a non-metro requirement still within there. That is approximately about 8 million also. We do have a current commitment right now for a $10 million deal. It's a behavioral health clinic. It is right sizing right now, which means that it might not be 10 million. So I would have told you earlier this year, no, I don't have allocation. But it's possible that I might have FCI might have 5 billion available, depending on how this piece comes together and and the rural deployment. So what the rural non-metro deal project will require. There may be a piece there that is available. It will not be less than 5 million though. Leverage loan deals as a single CDE start at 5 million. It's cost prohibitive to be anything smaller than 5 million, just from the attorney fees, consultants, and all of the other additional due diligence, expectations, permits, everything. So complicated, we might, and certainly if you talk to us now, you could be a potential, but also right now, you could also make your way into our pipeline for the allocation, and those announcements would be expected in 2021. And then I would also tell you that there is a window for projects that did get started, that didn't get allocation. There is inherent risk because the window is less than 24 months for reimbursement of expenses that have already happened. And that's what makes the consultant really, really important. They often can shepherd you into a number of pipelines so that if FCI doesn't win, there's another CDE that you are already working with to increase your award, an allocation chance. There's no magic that FCI will be an awardee. It is an extremely competitive program. The amount of new market tax credit allocations is like somewhere, I think, in the trillions, and they award
3.5 billion.
3.5 billion. But the award sizes are what they actually award is much smaller, 3.5 billion. And the request is far, far in excess from all the applicants. So
like 10 times. 10
yeah.
times.
So with that said, like, I always encourage people, it should not only be us, it should be multiple other applicants of CDEs. There is a window you can work within, even if you do get your project started. A good consultant can work through that with you. And that would be my recommendation. But you certainly could reach out to us with your project.
Right.
And we certainly would start the process and see what happens.
Right. So if I could just add to that, I would say, yes, FCI is awesome for Wisconsin community facilities that are making a serious impact. Okay. We wish FCI, I mean, I wish, because I work almost exclusively with nonprofits trying to make a community impact, I wish they could get 3 times the allocation that they usually get, because that's how many amazing projects we have in Wisconsin that would fit that mission. However, there are about 80 CDEs nationally, and I just looked this up from the New Market Tax Credit Coalition, and actually 38% of all new market transactions go to community facilities, which is larger than any other sector with the new markets. And I only think that that's going to get to be a larger slice of the pie. So yes, there are many CDEs, and definitely throw that hat in the ring with FCI if you're a Wisconsin-based community facility in a severely distressed census tract, and let them talk with you about where they think your project timing is and how it could possibly fit. So that would be awesome. I have a question about whether a municipality or a public school where the primary funding is from property and or other taxes is eligible to apply for New Markets tax credits. Okay, so I want to give a real life example. Well, first the answer is yes, and. Okay, so it's a bit more complicated. So for example, the Madison Public Market is actually, it's the city of Madison that is kind of like the deal right now. And they currently have an allocation in the capital budget of about $7.5 million to put into the public market. And what we are working through right now with the city of Madison is which entity within that public body can be the Notre Dame in the transaction, right, the borrower, and which one can be the leveraged lender. Okay, so those 2 boxes, that's very important, and there are very specific, how can I say, organizational formations that have to be there. And so it's usually an affiliate. It will be like an affiliate, or it will be a quasi organization of the city of Madison. So for example, maybe a community development entity that they have set up that has a public purpose. And yes, it is funded with taxes, right? I mean, the city's contribution in my example is funded by our taxes somewhere around there, somewhere along the line. But we had to create, or we had to find, we actually already had these redevelopment entities and things set up. We had to find that and then say, will this work in a new markets transaction? So the answer is yes. Another example is City of Platteville. Several years ago, FCI was involved in this deal. I was involved in this deal when I was at FCI, and we had a private developer that did a downtown redevelopment in Platteville, Wisconsin, and it included a hospitality asset as well as the public library. And the things were connected, but it was the private developer that developed it, and at the end of 7 years, the idea was that the public library would go back to the city of Platteville. So we creatively figured out how to do that. And it's like a beautiful, awesome project. So I will say it's possible, and it has to be specific. It looks like we have a question from someone that Tracy knows, who works with Tracy. In the initial structure, after the CDE takes their fees and other fees, it appears that there is still a gap in reaching $7 million for the project. How is that gap made up if the leverage lender stack is already complete, or does it all typically equal out after those fees? Okay, so I will answer this, and I'd love to hear if anyone else has to chime in on that. But there is the project cost, there's a project budget, and there's the new markets budget. And so the way I look at the new markets is when we say, for example, Notre Dame School of Milwaukee, we said this is a $7 million new market tax credit allocation. And when we were figuring out like what's the right number to ask, because originally we had looked at like, okay, it's a $6 million or $6.5 million project, so that's how much we need an allocation. But that's just not true. So we have to size it to accommodate the actual project costs and like the hard cost and the soft costs related specifically to the construction of the project and some of the financing fees. And that is how 7 million was important, a number, and that's how we got to that, so that after fees, after all this, we are able to, with the leverage loan and the remaining B note, create the project that needs to be created. And I think that's how I always look at it. And we spend a lot of time in structuring to get that correct size, because when we request it from the CDE, you know, it goes through a lot, advisory board and this and that. And when you get a number approved by your advisory board, you do not want to go back, as you all know. So would anyone else like to add about that? Ivan?
Sure. I think I'll just answer it a slightly different way. But when you're figuring out your project, you know that you have what the project costs are. You have the amount of cash equity you do. You also figure out investments that you needed to do into this project, but maybe they don't, they're too far along to do the look back on the new market tax credit allocation. But either way, what the goal is to try to maximize the amount of allocation you can have. And that's where you work with your team, whether it's the investor, the consultant, and you're trying to take the project budget and maximize the amount of new market tax credit allocation you don't always get there, and that's where you end up afterwards. It looks like, hey, there was some extra money over here that wasn't in this budget. But when you start off, you're always trying to maximize that allocation. On certain deals, we've had borrowers participate in the leverage loan by being able to put their equity in on the leverage loan side, and it was a great way for a use of cash. But I think that's where we can get again creative on where everything goes in that model.
Got it. Okay, so we are right at 2:43. So I am going to put up on the screen our contact information. And then as I'm doing that, I'm going to just invite any closing comments. And, you know, Patrick, I'll start with you. If you want to just say anything as we close out.
I would just say, you know, I was not an expert in this, but you surrounded myself with people that did know this world, and it helped make a project that we knew we could get to a certain place. It really took us to the next level, and this is going to be such an impact on our families, on our students, and on the neighborhood. And I just really suggest that for those of you who are above that $5 million in terms of a building project, pursue this as much as you can. Surround yourself with people that you know you can work with to help figure out the details and some of the complexities. Get yourself a consultant to help walk you through it, but it is so worth it, and I can't recommend it enough.
Thanks, Patrick. Tracy, any closing remarks?
I think just being proactive and reaching out and asking questions, and you know, talking through your project with a potential CDE. They do have to be particularly buttoned up maybe by the time they get here. I know that I said I focus on mission, but there is a large piece that does have to be almost ready when you start talking to us in at least the visioning of it, if not already started. And we're here to answer questions. It's not just FCI as a CDE, it's any CDE in this operating in this, and there are many. FCI is just one example. There are CDEs who do manufacturing facilities. There's models related to affordable housing. There is some innovation within the program, but for the sake of today and simplifying it in your interest and niche, this one is particularly around community facilities. So you certainly can ask those questions, and you know, if we don't have the answer, we'll know someone in the field who could.
Yep. Ivan?
Thank you for putting this together and providing this as a resource that's out there for folks. New market tax credits are not for every situation, but if it does fit the situation, it is an amazing tool, and it is something that can really bring your project to the finish line. And again, if anything, know that every new market tax credit partner has their niche, and I think it's wise to talk to a consultant like Carrie, who knows all the players out there and puts the right niches together so that you have the right team.
Thanks, Ivan. Okay, so with that, I just want to thank all of the participants for today. I hope that if nothing else, you deepened your understanding of new market tax credits in some way, and that you have now, connected with, at least virtually, 4 people who have been through this, are committed to this work, and we know the purpose and possibility of new market tax credits. So I want to thank you all, and I wish you all the best with all of your community development endeavors.